Hey, shalom, everybody. Shalom. Welcome to the Way Remnant. I'm Jeff Brannon. Guys, we had a little emergency right before the show started tonight. I'd ask you to be in prayer for Ron Thompson. Miranda's in the other room doing some prayer. So if you guys could just reach out and just lift him up. Very excited tonight, guys, to have Dr. Douglas Hamp back in our green room. He's going to be talking about his new book, God's Divorce, the Bible's Hidden Love Story. And I'm just going to get right into it tonight, guys. I am so excited to bring Dr. Douglas Hamp back on the Way Remnant. Welcome back, brother. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks so much. It's great to be here.
How's things over in the great state of Colorado going?
Wonderful. We had a dump of rain. We get all of our rain all at once, like it comes like a tidal wave and then there's nothing for a while. But
Oh, that's so good.
yeah,
That's
it's
so
nice
good.
and sunny again today. So
I love it. I love it. Hey, I forgot to do something, brother, and we always do this here at the program, and we like to point out our first in comments. We give out this coveted award, first in comments award. This is actually to my mom, Lynn Hobbs. So congratulations, mom. First in comments. Glad you're here. We've got Leno in the comments, cover to cover. Jeremy Pierce. We've got Renee. Good to see you. We've got Karen C here. We just got all kinds of folks. We've got Shabbat Yiv, Yolanda. There we go from Virginia. Good to see you guys. Hallelujah. But brother, I am so excited to have you on tonight because I have been hearing you on the Prophecy Roundtable and talking about your new book, God's Divorce, the Bible's Hidden Love Story. I'd like to share that out so folks can look at that and see what that is. And you just put this out not too long ago, right?
Yeah, it just came out. Though I've been working on this for, gosh, how many years? That's how they go. You work on them for a long time and finally get them out. So
Finally get them out.
it's
So this is really good. I'd like to put the link out there for everybody and do that and post that in the chat for everybody. But I'd like to go ahead and get into this book. You mentioned you started several years ago. What first started stirring your heart to write this book?
Well, this is one that I've definitely had in the works for a long time. So when I first started to understand that I became part of Israel instead of replacing Israel. See, I grew up as a dispensationalist, and so I thought there were basically two worlds you could be part of: a dispensational camp, which is the church in Israel, and the other one is replacement theology, which, of course, I knew that was wrong. And that whole idea of replacement theology is that the church has replaced, hence the name, replaced Israel. And I couldn't see any other option. And yet, I don't know, somewhere around 2012, 2013, somewhere in there, I started to see this bigger picture that I have actually been grafted into Israel. The first thing I had to let go was I had to let go of the pre-trib rapture. And I'll tell you, once I let go of that puzzle piece, everything else started to fit into place. It was pretty crazy. And, I started looking at...
I did want to say it's so good to see you that we didn't get raptured. I did see, Scott sent me a picture of him. He's fully raptured. He's up in heaven. He texted me he said he borrowed St. Peter's digital phone from up there. I'm not sure how that works, but he's messed around. But yeah.
I wish those guys were right, man. I wish they were right. I really do. They could tell me that they told me so the whole way up. I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah.
That would be, that'd be totally
awesome. So you had to give up the pre-trib rapture and that kind of doctrine. How did that sit with you? Was that kind of a hard thing, or once you just started seeing it, you're just like, okay? Or did you later find bits and pieces were still kind of clinging on to your eschatology?
Well, I definitely didn't want to let it go because I like the pre-trib rapture. I mean, I still like the idea of getting out of here before it gets nasty. It's a great idea,
Right.
And I grew up with that, so it was really hard. It was like letting go of an old friend, and of course I knew it'd be painful. I knew that I would get a lot of pushback. I knew I would get rejected in various areas, and it was true because I had been quite popular on the prophecy circuits,
Mm-hmm.
And once I gave up pre-trib and that became known, then I was quickly kicked off the list and
Yeah.
considered. In fact, I was even on a list of like who's who in prophecy circles, and I was on the good apple list. Okay, and
Oh,
then
wow.
after I gave up pre-trib, now I'm on the bad apple list. So I'm literally on the bad apple list. I kid you not. So
Oh, my goodness.
that was painful, and of course, there's finances involved with that too, right? So that hurts
Sure.
too, and you see all the
Yeah.
money dry up. You're like, oh, bummer. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was too bad. But
Well, when
it
you go ahead. I'm
truth is
sorry. I was going to ask
yeah, yeah.
when you went to seminary, was the pre-trib pretty much the only thing that was taught, or was it, or this version of Commonwealth theology, being married, was that taught at all? Was this idea even hinted at when you were in in your in seminary?
Yeah, so I didn't actually go to seminary. I went to the Hebrew University, Jerusalem,
Okay.
Israel, and then I later got my PhD from the Louisiana Baptist University, but it wasn't
Okay.
seminary per se. I taught at a seminary. I taught at the Calvary Chapel School of Ministry, which is a seminary,
Okay.
and in Southern California, and very dispensational. And I was fully immersed in dispensationalism, so I never questioned it whatsoever. I thought it was the only system. It just made sense.
Right.
Like I was fully invested in the system, so I never questioned it at all.
Yeah.
I used to teach from Charles Ryrie's theology book. That's what
Right.
is taught at Dallas Theological
That's
Seminary.
theology. Hmm.
So I was in charge of teaching both the theology section and the eschatology section. I did that in English and in Spanish, so it was a lot of fun.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, I was fully vested, But there was a time when I had to teach on Calvinism versus Arminianism, and I was really frustrated because, like, I was saying to myself, these are both wrong. They're both wrong systems. They're both
Yeah.
missing the boat.
Right.
Because I had lived in Israel, I was fully convinced that God's chosen people
Hmm.
were the Jews, of course. And so when it talks about God choosing or God's elect in Matthew 24, I said, well, that's the Jews. And so I wrote this paper. I wrote a paper, Why God Did Not Elect Calvinists. And then I kind of shoehorned that into Matthew 24, and the pre-trib community loved it. They're like, yes, because that was one of their Achilles heels, right?
Yeah.
Well, what about Matthew 24? How can you say that we're going to get raptured when Jesus talks about it rather differently? And so I wrote this
Right.
paper. They loved it. And it's funny because as I wrote that paper, I was close, but I wasn't totally on. What I had understood in the paper was that when God says that he's elected a people, he's talking about Israel. Now, my understanding back then was that Israel and the Jews were one and the same thing. There was no distinction between them. It was like saying American or a United States citizen. Like, it's the same thing, right? It doesn't make any difference. Yeah. So it was only later when I kept studying the book of Ezekiel and many others, where I kept seeing the house of Israel, the house of Judah, the house of Israel, house of Judah. And ironically, I was giving a lecture on that paper to the church, and someone in the audience said, why do you keep saying the Jews when you mean to say the house of Israel? And I'm like, whatever, they're the same thing. What's the big deal, right? and so I totally blew this lady off. And but she really kind of got under my skin, because then I went back and I looked at it, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's right. And once I saw that there's a distinction, not just a historical distinction. I kind of knew about the historical distinction, but I never thought about it from a theological perspective. I never thought, oh my gosh, the theological distinction between the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And when God says that he's going to bring the house of Israel back, he's not talking about the Jews. Right. It took me a long time to finally connect those dots. But man, once I did, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And it's funny. I used to read Romans 11. Brethren, have you know that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. once again, I read that. I said, oh, those poor Jews, they can't see a thing, but we Christians, we've got it all figured out. And then later, when I understood that that was talking about the house of Israel and I'm part of it, I kind of wept because I thought, oh God, I'm so sorry.
Right.
I just understand. I didn't know. I thought you were talking about the Jews and you were talking about us, that we are blessed.
Yeah.
And all this made me a lot humbler, I have to say. And which isn't a bad thing, right? But it was a lot of these little moments where I just kept, getting these chinks in my armor until finally you're just totally exposed. You're like, okay, I have to finally admit this thing, that there are two different things going on here: house of Israel, house of Judah. Then I was looking at the book of Hosea. I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, but I will have mercy on the house of Judah. I was like, wait a second. That almost sounds like it's saying what it says, right? And that he's going to make a huge distinction between Israel and Judah. That means that Judah, the Jews, are not synonymous with Israel. And where did the house of Israel go? Into the Gentiles, right? And I'll tell you, this light bulb starts to go on. First, it's just a really soft glow. Then it keeps getting brighter and brighter and brighter. Until finally you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
It starts
then you
changing
circle back to
everything.
Romans 11.
Yeah, it just starts changing everything.
Well, you circle back to Romans 11, where he says that the fullness of the Gentiles, and you go back and you read Genesis 48, where Jacob crosses his hands, right? And he puts his right hand on the head of Ephraim. And then you're like, oh, and then Ephraim is a nickname for the northern kingdom of Israel, right? And suddenly it's just this flood. You're just flooded with all of these connections. And your mind is just going overboard. Like, I can't take any more. This is insane, because it's all coming into focus.
Yeah.
And then and then I remember some years ago, even when I was already in the Messianic thing, and I was doing some research for the Feast of Shavuot, and I think I was on like Chabad.org or Esh.com or something like that. And they're like, yeah, Shavuot is when God married Israel. I'm like, how did you guys know that?
Right.
And then I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm like, how did they know before we in the church knew this? Well, they've known this for such a long time. This isn't news to them, right? The Jews have known for a long time that they and Israel got married. In fact, I got an endorsement for the book from Aaron Lipkin. And,
I saw that.
He says, well, we've known this for a long time, right?
Right.
I'm like, okay. Like, what can we do, right? But it's just funny, God almost has this weird sense of humor where he's just like, I'm just going to keep that covered up from the Gentiles, Gentile believers anyway, not Jewish believers for a long time, until one day we finally see it, and then it's this big explosion, right? But but the same kind of jaw-dropping reaction that I had years ago, now people, when they read the book, they're like, I didn't know that. I'm like, yeah, I know, because I didn't know it either. And
I love how you frame this up.
Right?
Yeah, you frame this up as a love story, the gospel, as a love story rather than a legal transaction. Why would you say that shift is important for a believer to really wrap their head around?
I'm seeing all of the Bible as a love story now. I'm even seeing Revelation as a love story.
Wow.
Because God is love, right? If God is love, and if I'm going to take that seriously, then I should be seeing love everywhere. But the way I heard about much of the Bible, especially the Old Testament, especially the book of Revelation, is this very judgmental God is kind of ticked off, and he's not happy because people aren't doing things the way he wants them to do it. And so he just judges people, he zaps them with lightning or whatever it may be, or he throws hailstones on them, and I mean, even let's take Genesis chapter 6, where you had the whole flood.
Right.
Well, that was also God's love preserving humanity against this wickedness that the sons of God were doing back in those days, you know? And so just by reframing it a little bit,
Mm.
You don't have to get rid of all your facts. You just color them a little bit differently. And
Yeah.
suddenly it takes on a whole new meaning. It's the glass half empty, half full, right?
That's
You
great.
could, I mean, is it half full? Maybe, or is it half empty? Maybe.
Right.
But by
Right.
looking at it half full, you're optimistic. And now when you see that it's a love story, because God loves his people, God doesn't
Yeah.
desire that anybody should be lost. He wants Israel to come back. And, this is the language that we have in scripture. It's not just me making it up or putting on rose-colored glasses. In Jeremiah 31, God says, is Ephraim not my dear son? My heart yearns for him, right?
Mm.
And yet
Yeah.
this is the same God that told Ephraim, you're no longer my people. I'm not your God. Lo ami, lo ruchama, not my people, no mercy. It's the same God. But it's not like he was gleeful about telling her to get
Right.
lost. It's not like he was like, you know what, I'm so sick of you. Just get out and don't ever come back. He didn't say that. I mean, there was like this mourning in his heart. He did what he did because he's God. He has a righteous standard. And eventually, you just can't put up with nonsense. You can't put up with sin. You can't put up with people murdering their babies incidentally. Okay. I mean, this is what they were doing back then. They were taking already fully born babies. These babies who were not, I mean, they were out and about, these little babies.
Yeah.
And then they would take them and they would burn them alive. I mean, yeah, I can see why God is a little ticked off about that. Right.
Yeah.
And, so he's like, I just can't do this anymore. If you want those pagan gods so badly, go for it, sweetheart. Here's your certificate of divorce. You're free to go. You're free to go after any of those gods that you want so badly. I'm releasing you so that you can go chase those lovers. Go for it. And then with like this twinge of pain in his heart, he says, but one day, no, keep walking, honey. But one day,
yeah,
I'll bring you back to me. One day I'm going to betroth you to me in righteousness. Not today, so keep going.
Yeah.
But one day I'm going to bring you back. And that's the love story. And it reframes it, because what I was taught in dispensationalism is that, God and Israel, they kind of tried things out. They were a couple for a while and it didn't work out. And so then God's like, you know what? I'm going to put this thing on pause, and I'm going to go after this other chick named the church.
Right.
And I'm going to give her all of my love for a good long time. And then I'm going to go back one day and go back to Israel, sort of like, it's almost like cold leftovers, like you just enjoyed this wonderful meal with the church, but now tomorrow I have to go back and just eat cold leftovers, right? It's like cold pizza.
Yeah.
It's not even, and it's like, wow, that's not so exciting, is it? And so when you reframe it as this love story, you see that the same God that married Israel, the same God that had to divorce Israel, sadly, is the same God that is now coming to rescue her, even as they reject him en masse, even as they say, you're not the Messiah we're looking for, even as they say, no, you're not the one that we wanted. He's still dying for her to put her back together. And when you see this, it reframes just about all of Paul's letters. It puts everything in right perspective. And suddenly we're not divided. We don't have two different camps. We don't have two different brides for two different grooms. That's what some people teach. I mean, they teach, and this is what some dispensationalist teachers are teaching, is that God the Father has Israel. Jesus has the church. Two different grooms, two different brides, two different destinies, two different households. And it's like, wait a second. I thought we served one God. I thought there was one
that kind of
bride.
gets to polytheism almost, right? I mean, just the way they
well, I don't really want to mention the name of this guy, but he's a scholar that I respect. He's very intelligent. I've learned a lot from this man. And yet when he comes to this topic, I'm like, dude, where did you come up with this one? Like, this is a crazy idea. But I get it. I see the predicament that he's in, and it's because he holds so tightly to dispensational theology, and that he has to keep that wall of separation between the church and Israel.
Yeah.
That you get into this theological corner. He's painted himself in and he can't get out. And so now the only way to reconcile it, theoretically, is to say, well, God the Father, Jehovah the Father, he's got Israel, and Jesus has the church. And so there's two different things, because they have to maintain that distinction. Otherwise, all of the dispensational hoorah goes out the window, right?
Really,
and,
really
and so they have to maintain that, or their entire system collapses if they don't.
Yeah, I was
if they don't keep that distinction there. Yeah.
I was just going to say, Doug, it almost gets into like Marcionism. It almost gets into like Cerinthus, the doctrines that Paul was. Whole reason that Paul supposedly, according to Irenaeus, wrote the letter to the Galatians was to combat the disciples of Cerinthus coming and pushing this what I think later becomes Marcionism, where there's these two different gods and mixing of Gnosticism and all of this mess. And we still see this today in the church. And I love a quote that you have. If you don't mind me reading a quote out of your book, you said, "The law said the bride could not return, so the husband died. But that was not the end of the love story. It was the only possible gateway to its most astonishing twist, a reconciliation that will not only redeem his scattered bride, but invite an unexpected family of nations into the very heart of his ancient promise." Man. Oh, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. You'd almost get the impression that the church was, or Gentiles were plan B. God had this thing going on with Israel, doesn't work out. So he's like, maybe I'll see what's happening with the Gentiles. But that's not the story that we're given. God has always known that he was going to graft in Israel. And this is why it becomes so important. When I say graft in Israel, but graft in Gentiles. So, yeah. So let's go back to the first marriage, right? So God and Israel, they're at Mount Sinai. They exchange vows. He says, "I want you to be my treasured possession." She says, "All that the Lord has said, we will do." But who was there among Israel that had also come out of Egypt? There was this thing called the mixed multitude.
Right.
And they were comprised of Egyptians and probably lots of different foreigners, because Egypt was the Rome of the ancient day, if you will.
Right.
They were the New York City of its time. And so you had a lot of different nationalities coming through. This was a major market. And so probably some people got stuck there, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, this God of Israel is pretty awesome. I'm gonna team up with him instead of hanging out with these Egyptians and getting clobbered." And when they went out with Israel to Mount Sinai, God didn't have the Jews over here, or the Israel over here, and the mixed multitude over here. The mixed multitude got mixed in with Israel. So, presumably some went to every different tribe, and they just became part of it. So even from the beginning, God was already mixing in the Gentiles. And so then when the marriage between God and Israel goes south, and God then says to the 10 tribes, "You're not my people," and he scatters them, and they're absorbed, swallowed up into the nations, the Gentiles. Well, now they've become part of, they're just generic. They're nothing special. They're not a people. They're a non-people. And what are non-peoples? Gentiles. That's what it means to be a Gentile. It's a non-people in the biblical context. So Israel became a non-people. They became Gentiles.
Right.
So when God calls the Gentiles, it means that now any Gentile who responds to this call has the opportunity to be grafted back into the house of Israel. And that's what Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2. He says, "But you, once Gentiles, right, are no longer strangers from the covenants and promises. You are now part of the commonwealth of Israel," right? So he's saying that you were once Gentiles, you were once of the nations, but now you're part of the commonwealth of Israel. And he says that this is to you, those who are near, and to those who are far off. That's the same term that Daniel uses in his beautiful prayer, Daniel chapter 9. He talks about those of us who are near and those who are far off. The ones who are far off are the house of Israel. They became a non-thing. So God already knew, he'd already prepared for all this. And when a Gentile comes to faith, they're now becoming part of the house of Israel, becoming part of Ephraim. And of course, and the goal isn't to remain Judah and Ephraim. And that's where I think some people who are in the Torah camp, they get all hooty, all uppity about, well, I'm part of Ephraim. Like, well, well, that's really wasn't the goal. The goal here is that God wants to put those two sticks back together so that they become one nation, one nation. That's the point. And, we say those kinds of things because we want to feel special. But trust me, you are special. But, God loves you. But we don't have to say, well, I'm this or I'm that. But God's pulling us all in so that we have one new man from the two. That's the incredible part. One new man from the two. So when I started to see all of this in its greater context, I went back to Ephesians especially, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I just kept seeing these details that were blowing my mind. And I was like, I've been reading the book of Ephesians all wrong, especially the first two chapters.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there are these little things in the text where, I don't know if translators intend to do them. I've done some translation, and I can tell you my translations have not been perfect because I'm a human and I have biases, and we
all have bias. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm usually blind to my biases, right? I mean, most people are blind to their biases. That's why it's a bias, is that you just assume the world is this way. And so in Ephesians 1:11, it says, now we have obtained an inheritance. That's the New King James Version. Yeah. In the New English translation, I was reading this years ago and it blew my mind. It said that we are God's possession, or we are God's inheritance. And I was like, what? That can't be what it says. So I go back and I check their Greek, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is what it says, right? It's a middle passive. It's a middle usage, which means, or passive, whatever. But it means that I'm not getting something. I'm the thing that's being given. I'm the thing that's being inherited. Yeah. And once I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what God says. He says, I'm going to take you to be my treasured possession, right? I'm going to take you, Israel, to be my treasured possession. So when Paul says that, he says that it's not that we have received something. I haven't obtained something. I'm the thing that is being obtained. I'm the thing that's being inherited by who? By God. And right there, that one little thing, whether it was intentional or not, but that one little mistranslation hid the connection that the New Testament believers, whatever you want to call them, have with the people of Israel, and that we're not distinct from them. We become part of them. Right, we become part of them. Now, and let me just point out, there are still some distinctions. When a Chinese immigrates to America, they often keep their language. I mean, you just do, right? Because that's how it works. You often keep your food, which is great. They keep some of their holidays. That's great, but they also become American. And so yes, there is distinction. Like, I'm not Jewish. I'm not trying to be Jewish. I did not grow up in Israel. I didn't grow up in the other promised land, Brooklyn. No. That's not my heritage, right? I grew up in Michigan, and that's what I am. But insofar as the politia, as far as the commonwealth, as it's called, there's no distinction between someone who's a native born and someone who's grafted in. I'm exactly part of the same thing.
I love that. And I love that there's, in that aspect, there's no distinction. We see that in Rabbinic Judaism. We see that even in some Messianic circles, where they want the Gentiles, the ger that's coming in, right, to almost be a second class citizen, if even that. So that's pretty
Mhm.
interesting. Doug, you argue that Yeshua, and I just love your book. I want to say, this is so nice. I've heard you say this many times on the Prophecy Roundtable that you didn't use a lot of vinegar. You didn't, my words, you didn't use a lot of big Cadillac theological words and this type of thing. You wrote it for the common person just to read, and it is so nice. It is so, to me, it's very pastoral, and it just reaches out to the heart of people, and because you are coming against this big, 800-pound gorilla monster of dispensationalism really hard in this. You argue that Yeshua didn't come to start a new religion, right? But to
Yeah.
restore a broken marriage. I love the language that you use in this.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I and a few friends, we wrote a book called Commonwealth Theology some years ago. I don't know, was that before COVID? I think. I believe so. And it's, time flies, right? We used a lot of vinegar in that book. I'll just say that. We were trying to establish this new idea, and we knew that there would be all kinds of people
Pushback.
shooting at us.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to insulate ourselves, or trying to preempt every argument we could, and to show how our system, our way of seeing the world now, is correct. And that's not a wrong way to write a book, but it's just a very different strategy. That is one that is very polemic. It says, hey, I know you want to fight me, so let's go. Let's put our gloves on. And I thought, that one was okay. But I really feel like if I could just get around all of that stuff and just write a story that we can all agree on, that it is a love story. And I'll tell you, the response has been astounding. And I've gotten, like I told you, Aaron Lipkin from Lipkin Tours in Israel, he endorsed it. There was a Calvary Chapel pastor out here in Denver that endorsed it, which I thought was pretty awesome. Because again, I wasn't coming and saying, well, you guys are all wrong and I'm all right. I wasn't saying that at all. I was just saying, look, maybe there's something we all missed, right? And when you talk about a love story, it's hard. It's pretty hard to not like a good love story, And everyone's going to agree that God is a wonderful, loving, compassionate God.
Right.
And so I just tried to get around some of these mental barriers that a lot of us have. And it's amazing when you can kind of sidestep it. It diffuses a lot of stuff, and then we don't have to put on our gloves at all, so we can just hold hands.
I love that. When I know when I first came into this Torah movement, whatever you want to call it, I had met some friends of mine that were from high school that actually had come into this way before I did, and had been living it for several years. And I had reached out to one of them and mentioned about God's divorce, and I was so surprised to get shot down immediately. It was just kind of fascinating that some people, even in the Torah movement, don't they kind of reject this whole premise, this whole idea that Mount Sinai was a marriage covenant, that God really didn't get divorced. That's just words, metaphor, analogy, whatever. How do you approach something? Have you had that same pushback? Maybe not from the book, but from previous years.
Yeah, I've definitely had some people that cannot imagine that God could get divorced.
Yeah.
One, because, I mean, there's murder and then there's divorce. And, sometimes divorce is seen as a little bit worse than murder.
Yeah.
So that already is a huge red flag for some people, because, there's just no way that God could get divorced. That's impossible.
Yeah.
But I mean, he does. And the language that God uses is very clear.
I think it's real clear. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there are others that would suggest that this is all metaphor. But man, if it's metaphor, he sure does take it a long way. And here's the litmus test. When the New Testament talks about the church being the bride of Christ, Who thinks that that's just metaphor?
Right.
I don't think anybody thinks that's just metaphor.
No.
I think
Right.
we take that as, I mean, I don't know how you take it literally in because I don't think we're going to be like smooching Jesus in the age to
Right.
come. But we are going to, well, you know, without getting weird about it, but we are going to live together, right? We're going to hold hands, as it were.
Yeah.
You know, we're gonna have some amazing pillow talk in the age
Yeah.
to come, however that looks, right? So
Yeah.
it's not sexual in that sense, but it is
Right.
very intimate, right?
Right.
And that's the same thing, is that, so then let's just take that idea of the wife or the bride, and let's just go back to where it all started, where that language starts. Well,
Right.
that's definitely at Mount Sinai. Look, God takes Israel out of Egypt. They go in the 3rd month at the Feast of Shavuot, which will become the Feast of Shavuot at that point.
Right.
And God says, you know, I want to take you as my treasured possession. And then what does Israel say? All that the Lord has said, we will do. And that's in Exodus 24. And then Moses takes the blood of a bull and he sprinkles it on the heads of the representatives of all the tribes. And that ratifies the covenant. That's essentially the couple signing their name on the marriage license. That's the same idea. And then what she was not supposed to do, which is to go after other gods. That's it. That was number one. Okay. Yeah. I mean, murder's on there and stealing. Those are bad. Okay. But the first thing on the list was don't go after any other gods. All right.
Yeah.
The other stuff we can work out. Okay. But if you go after other gods, well, then, you know, and that's what makes a marriage holy. A marriage isn't holy because the couple is perfect. It's not holy because she never burns dinner or he never leaves the toilet seat up. Right? Those aren't the things that make it holy. What makes it holy is there's only 2 people in the relationship and not 3. If you know, as soon as there's 3 people, it's no longer a holy relationship because it's set apart. So they were supposed to be set apart. They blew that on their wedding night. They go after the golden calf, and God's pretty hot about this. Moses talks him off the ledge, and then they go on, you know, and you know, so for the first 400-ish years, they're doing not so great, but you know, things could be worse. And then under Solomon, the kingdom splits in 2. And so then he says to the northern kingdom, okay, follow me and I'll be your God. You'll be my people. Well, they go from bad to worse. And then after 700 years, they're on the counselor's couch, and God just says, you know, honey, I just can't do this any longer. You know, clearly you want to be with other gods. So I'll tell you what, why don't you go? I'll give the ring back. Here's your certificate of divorce. Adios.
Yeah.
And that's it. And we see this language, right? Jeremiah chapter 3. He says, says, you know, for all that backsliding Israel has done, her sister Judah was even worse, you know, and I gave Israel a certificate of divorce. And yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but went and played the harlot also. Right. So he says that. He says in Hosea, I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, but I will have mercy on the house of Judah. And so he says to Hosea, name your kids Jezreel, Yisrael, right? What God will scatter, not Israel, but Yisrael, God will scatter. And then Lo Ruchama, no mercy. And then Lo Ami, not my people, right? And he's saying this to the northern kingdom of the house of Israel. And then he says, but I will gather you and I will betroth you to me in righteousness. And those who were once called not my people now are my people. Who quotes that? Paul in Romans chapter 9, Peter in 1 Peter 2, right? And so they're applying it to New Testament people, specifically to the Gentiles, saying that, hey, this thing that God said about the house of Israel is now applied to you. There you have it.
It's this mystery that that Paul talks about in Ephesians and Romans, and you know, why did Jeff? I was a pastor for 4 years. Why did I not ever understand this mystery? Why did I not see this mystery that when you see it, it totally makes sense? And you're like, you do that little, I know you're old enough to remember the old V8 commercials. Boom, I could have had a V8. I could have had this years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. I of course I can't really answer that. I think that's a God question. But what I do know is most of us were blinded from this, and my hunch is that it just wasn't God's timing. Just like the rock that had become the chief cornerstone, this was hidden from their eyes. This was God's doing. I don't know, like how that works. I don't know. That's kind of God's department, how he can hide the most obvious thing that this is the Messiah from the leadership. I don't know. But in any event, what is exciting is that a lot of people are waking up to this. Batya Wooden saw this back in the 80s. That was a long time ago. And I didn't see it till 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there. So I'm definitely not the first guy to see this. Others have seen it. And I think we just, we're all kind of converging on this new reality, which is really exciting. But also, we've been in the throes of Marcionism for roughly 2,000 years. And I talk about this in my video, Haunted Theology and the Ghost of Marcion, where, Marcionism did a huge number on us. People don't realize the impact. I kind of have another book that I'm, it's an iron in the fire, let's put it that way. But maybe next year I'll come out with that. Who knows? But I want to talk about Marcionism more, because this is a conspiracy that very few people know about. And yet, when you read, especially the things of Paul, it almost sounds like Paul is against God's commandments. He's against the Torah, against the law. That's how I was raised. And I still, to this day, I've had people tell me that I'm going to go to hell for putting people back under the law. That's why you didn't see it, Jeff. That's why I didn't see it, because there's this fear that you will go to hell and burn forever if you even entertain this idea that you're part of Israel, because you're trying to become Jewish, you're trying to earn your salvation through the law. And boy, that put the fear of God in me. I didn't want to burn forever. I didn't want to be a heretic, and it took me years to overcome that. I had this fear. I was just like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm a heretic. I really remember writing stuff down. I'm like, I hope I'm not going to be a heretic for this. I'm like, Lord, please forgive me. I'm just trying to write what I see. But I was afraid that I was crossing this proverbial theological line, and that my name was going to be blotted out of the Lamb's book, and that's why we don't see it, because there's a huge fear factor. And it's not even just, going to prison or something earthly, but this could be your entire eternity. Who wants to stake their entire eternity on something? Nobody does, right? And so we just we just toe the line and like, oh, I'm not going to say anything. But after a while, you're like, I just can't stay quiet anymore, because there it is in the text, and doggone it, it says it. And I've looked at it in the Greek. I've seen it in the Hebrew. I've studied this thing out, and I know what it says. And you can't tell me otherwise. I'm not going to be quiet about it anymore, because this is a lie that we're living. And, and so this is where eventually we just have to kind of get to this thing, this new realization. But so what I tried to not do in this book is to not respond in a polemic or accusatory fashion. Because I don't think that my teachers, had some secret agenda. And I hear this from people like, well, they kept the truth from me. Like, who are they? Who are they?
I used to preach the same thing.
They that you're talking about.
I didn't have an agenda. It was just, I was parroting what I had learned. And what I thought was right.
Exactly. Same thing here. I didn't have an agenda either. I just thought it was true. And I think I was pretty well studied, and, I wasn't trying to do anything. And then I saw some more, and I was like, oh, wow. This is why I'm a lot less dogmatic on just about everything nowadays, because I'm like, there's a whole lot of stuff I missed in my early years, and I thought I was so right. I thought I was so
Yep.
smart, but now I'm like, I mean, I'll stand on this one because I have all the scriptures, and I've already come across the bridge of ignorance, so that's kind of handy. But it's a love story, and I think Satan has done a masterful job of casting God as the cosmic bully.
Yeah.
I mean, just listen to Richard Dawkins. I mean, he's got this whole diatribe about, God is the most misogynistic, homophobic, blah, 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 terrible God you could ever imagine, right? I mean, I forget which book it's in, but, he's quite proud of it. He's like, oh, let me quote it. I say it so nicely in my book, and that's the kind of God that a lot of people think about, especially when it comes to the Old Testament. And let's be clear, it's not just atheists who think that. There's a lot of Christians who think that as well. And we have certainly Marcion to thank for that in large part, but we also have Scofield in his Scofield Bible with all of his notes. He tells us that back at Sinai, this is what he says: Israel rashly accepted the law. Like remember those guys who put the little thing in their hand, the little buzzer, and they're like, they shake my hand, right? And God's like, here, take this. And Israel's like, oh, what? And like, oh, you suckers. Like, that's the kind of presentation that Scofield and others make of this, is that Israel was stupid. They got suckered into saying yes to the law. And then thankfully, Jesus came and finally freed us from this terrible system. Wow. That is basically what is taught. And I talk about that in one theology.
Yeah, I look at some things, Doug. I look back to how I started coming out of dispensationalism. And I remember, you had the 7 ages of dispensation, and you had this age of law. But at the inception of the age of law, you had Israel committing adultery on their honeymoon night, and she should have been put to death right then. But God had grace right there at the supposed inception of the age of law. But we miss that because we have been so indoctrinated with these things. I had a question here. Someone is not really grabbing a hold of this, and I apologize. I would like to, if Doug, could I have you help us walk through what the Torah says about the marriage covenant and about what is adultery, and then why did Yeshua have to die in order to bring about this new mystery? Could you walk us through that?
Yeah, for sure. So Deuteronomy 24 that says, if a man has a wife and he finds some ervat devar, some unclean thing in her, and he gives her a certificate of divorce and sends her out of his house, then she becomes another man's wife, and the same thing happens. He gives her a certificate of divorce, sends her out of his house. She cannot go back to the first husband. All right, so what's important to see here is that, for one, divorce was not unthinkable. It was a very real system. Also, Exodus 21:10 says that a man must provide if he takes 2 wives and he cannot neglect the second wife. He must give her food, clothing, and quote unquote conjugal rights, or onata is the Hebrew word. Basically, it's love. Okay, so. And then if he doesn't, then she can go free. All right. So there were grounds for divorce. All right. But back to Deuteronomy 24. So in this case, God has a wife. He finds some unclean thing in her. After 7 centuries, he gives her a certificate of divorce, sends her out of his house. She goes and hangs out with Baal, with Molech, with Ashtoreth, with all these other gods. And then after a while, she's like, I think I'll go back to my first husband. That's exactly what Gomer said, right? She said, I think I'll go back to my first husband. It was better back then.
Yeah.
But the law says, can't do that. can't do that. Even in Jeremiah chapter 3, God, there once again, he's quoting. They say, if a man has a wife and he finds some unclean thing in her and he sends her out of his house, can he take her back? No, the light would be greatly polluted. Even so, I say, Shuvi Eli, come back to me. Right. And so you're like, wait, is God, is he not keeping his own law? Well,
right.
Pause, hold that thought for a second. Because, and I think this is the mystery. This is the mystery that Paul was talking about. Because I think the prophets were all scratching their heads, like saying, wait a second, how can God take her back? Not doubting that he will, but how can he do it? How can God take her back when the law says he can't take her back? Now, this is where Christians get really funny, because I've met a lot of Christians that say, well, he's just God. He can do whatever he wants. I'm like, well, he's God. No. He has to do what he said he's going to do. Yeah. Right? In fact, he makes a big deal of that. Is God a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should not keep his word? Has he not said it? Has he said he will he not do it? Yeah, he will. God's not a liar. He will keep his word. If anything you can know about God, he will keep his word.
Yeah.
And if God doesn't keep his word, well, then we're all toast. Okay.
That's
we're all in big trouble. Yeah. I'm glad that God is not whimsical. He's not capricious, but he is steadfast. And I even think Satan is banking on that. I think Satan's like, hey, you said it, you got to do it now, right? And God's like, don't you worry. So there's no way around this in the normal sense. God and Israel get divorced. She's with other dudes. She can't go back. That case closed, right? So there's no hope. You're without hope in the world. There's no way to go back to God. You were once part of his people, but now you're not part of his people because of divorce. And now you're toast. There's no hope for you.
Right.
And this is the handwriting of requirements that was against us, that was contrary to us.
Yeah.
See, once you begin to understand this, Paul's weird sayings start to come into focus.
They absolutely
and it's not about God being done with the law. It's that God is overcoming the law of the husband. And the way that he overcame the law of the husband was that he died, because Paul makes a big deal of Romans chapter 7. He says, brethren, I write to you who know the law. You know that the law has dominion over man as long as he shall live. And if he has a wife and, and if she goes out with another man, she called an adulteress.
Right.
But if the husband dies, she's free from the law of the husband, not the Torah, not the 10 commandments. She's free from the law of the husband.
Yeah.
And now this is where a lot of pastors say, oh, Paul was just kind of going on about marriage or something. He was just talking about this in a very, ethereal kind of sense. No, it wasn't. He even makes it very clear. Deliberate. I'm talking to you who know the law.
Very deliberate.
So people that knew the law would have said, oh, Deuteronomy 24, I know the passage. Yep, absolutely. Devarim, I know exactly where we're talking about. They knew what he was talking about. And so his whole point is that you've become dead to the law of the husband through the body of Christ.
Yeah.
And now you can marry this new guy who was raised, even Christ who rose from the dead. You're like, wait, so Christ died. I was married to him, but now he's dead. And so that marriage contract died with him, and all the stipulations, the penalties, the handwriting that's against us, called the divorce certificate, that has also been nailed to the cross. And now Jesus rises, a new legal entity, and now he's free. He's unencumbered by all of the things that the law said you can't do because of the divorce. So now he's free. So now she's free. Wow. Right. I think Paul was doing backflips. He's like, oh my goodness, if you guys could see how cool this is theologically. And I think that's what he was trying to say. But man, it got lost in translation somewhere because we didn't have context. Because, Romans 7, I write to you who know the law. How many people know the law? How many Christians have been studying the Old Testament? Not many.
Not many.
Thanks to Marcion, because we were told that was Jewish stuff. We were told that that's Old Testament. That's not for us. We're New Testament Christians. And so we couldn't see it. We couldn't see it for the longest time because that was dangerous. Going back to the Old Testament, other than for the Psalms and some of the stories of David, but otherwise it was a bit dangerous because you might get sucked in and start doing that Jewish stuff.
Don't forget tithing. Tithing's important too in the Old Testament, but
well, there's always that exception, but otherwise.
But
exactly.
I just think about and people have this fallacious understanding of what the new marriage covenant is, because now they're thinking, well, I don't have to do all that stuff that's left of Matthew. I'm just going to do what my God, my New Testament God Jesus is going to do and tells me to do. I don't have to do anything in the Old Testament, only unless Jesus says it, or maybe says it twice, or but it's the same vows. It's the same vows.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a new marriage covenant. Would you? Is that
exactly.
all? Is that kind of the same thing?
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of like, if you get married your first time, you say, for better, for worse, for rich or poor, and that marriage doesn't work for whatever reason, you find a new person, you probably use the same vows. I've officiated at many, many weddings, and they're all pretty much the same vows,
They are. Yeah.
Because the vows are great. There's nothing wrong with the vows.
Right.
And so, yeah, the vows are kind of the same. But, hopefully the new marriage, whatever, is going to work out better than the last one, right? That's the whole idea. But in this case, God has died so that the divorce certificate that was standing in the way of the house of Israel coming back in the covenant, that's been wiped out of the way. And so now any Gentile who wants to come in is no longer barred. They don't have to become Jewish per se. They can if they want, but that's not needed. You can come in through Christ. You can come in through the house of Israel, through the blood of Christ. And the whole goal is not to keep a house of Judah and a house of Israel, but to put these two back together as one. That's the one new man that Paul's talking about. And, so many of those Pauline passages, I did not understand as I should have. I mean, I had somewhat of an understanding, the one new man. Well, I guess that's Jew, and I thought maybe it was Jew and Gentile, but I didn't understand the fullness of it, right? I didn't understand really what that was getting at, like I do now.
Yeah.
And concerning the law, this is another masterful stroke on Satan's part, right? Like, to get us thinking that law is just so oppressive and so unfair. And I feel more freedom now than I ever had. When I was just in the church at large, I thought there were all these kind of unseen rules that I had to do, and I still wasn't sure if I could play cards and go dancing. I mean, there were so many extra rules that God said nothing about. One person has counted them in the New Testament, so-called New Testament rules, something like 1,300. I'm like, well, that's a lot of would-be rules, right? And even if you take the Jewish number of 613 laws, which I think most of those are duplicates, but it all boils down to two things: love God, love your neighbor. What does it look like to love your neighbor? Well, don't kill him, for one. That's a good start. Don't talk trash about him. That's another of the commandments. Don't steal his wife, right? I mean, there's all these commandments. You're like, oh, once you put it like that, like, yeah, and it gives us freedom, because what I should be doing to others, I'm hoping they're going to do for me, and now we can all live in a peaceable society. And if we don't, then the corruption happens, and eventually society begins to dissolve. It begins to just sink because it's become so corrupted. Well, it's like that rust on your car. Eventually it falls apart, right? And it's dissolved. Like, that's the real problem.
How does this teaching, Doug, that you present in your book, God's Divorce, the Bible's Hidden Love Story, how does this teaching help someone maybe who feels divorced or estranged from God personally?
Yeah, well, you can see that God goes to great lengths to restore the relationship. I mean, here's Israel. She kept thumbing her nose at him. She kept giving him the middle finger. She kept saying, I want nothing to do with you. She said F you repeatedly. and on and on and on. And still, he was willing to die. He was willing to pay the ultimate price to get her back. And, probably most of us are not quite as bad as corporate Israel was, I hope. But even if we are, it shows you that God went to the ends of the earth to get back this completely wayward, pagan, audacious, sinful, evil, wicked woman that thumbed her nose at him time and again. Wow, that's an amazing God. That is a lot of grace.
Yeah. I've got a quote here from you. You say the feast is prepared. I'm telling you, I thank you. I really, really enjoyed your book. I'm not just saying that. It's a really good book. It's a great read. You say the feast is prepared, the shofar will sound, and the world will witness what love looks like when it refuses to break, even when betrayed, even when divorced, even when buried in darkness. I'm just, how does this understanding of what we've been talking about here with God's marriage to Israel, how does this shape the way that we maybe should view end time events?
That's a great question. I'm rethinking how I look at the end times, because I was told when I was in Calvary Chapel that the book of Revelation is God pouring out his wrath upon a Christ rejecting world. And of course the church was taken out, and then God beat up on the world, and of course he beat up on the Jews. And I just don't see it that way anymore. I think it's more like Morpheus coming to Neo, if Neo represents humanity, and he says, hey, take the red pill. I have such an incredible thing to show you. I want to take back this world, not because I hate the people that are currently running it, but because I have a kingdom of life, a kingdom of light instead of death and darkness. I have a kingdom of joy instead of depression. I have a kingdom where we get along, and all the things that you've been pining for millennia are going to be there. And I want to show it to you. And so he's going to send his two witnesses to begin, and the whole thing that's going to happen. But it's not just to come and bludgeon the people that say no. It's because he wants to establish his kingdom of love. Will there be resistance? Yes, of course. Because, Satan knows what's going on, and the rest of that are following just think that this world is the best that we have, and we've got to fight for what's ours and protect our way of life, and that's part of the deception. But the ultimate goal is to help people that are trapped in this darkness and to usher them back into the light. That is what God really wants to do. And so it's helped me to reframe the whole thing as a love story. It's an exciting love story. There's definitely going to be some action and some sword fighting and all that stuff, right? So it's not a boring love story. It's not Days of Our Lives soap opera. This is Princess Bride kind of love story. This is where you've got giants, and you've got sword fighting, and you've got Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die, and all this stuff. That's the kind of story that we have. It's epic, it's big, it's blockbuster, but it's all centered around love. So, the book, just kind of going through the process and reframing it in a love context instead of a legalese context. I don't know. God is not sterile. And I think somehow we've allowed the characteristic or the characterization of God to become rather sterile, rather about this legal thing that he's got to do. Well, God is just, and so he's got to do these just things. And he is just. Yeah. But he's just motivated by love. There's a huge difference. He's motivated by love, not because of retribution and because, his justice demands that he, punish everybody for whatever. I'm like, his justice demanded a lot of things, but he always finds a way to be merciful. In a way, God's almost a pushover. When you start looking at it, he's like, come on, Israel, just work with me here. I'm trying to
How
work
many
this out. Okay.
how
You
many
know,
hundreds of years from the wedding night? How many hundreds of years did God? I mean, God legally could have just wiped them out time after time after time after time, ad nauseum, time after time, and God is just always just. I think of the prodigal son, Doug. I think, here's a guy that got his inheritance and went out and spent everything, and wound up living among the Gentiles and living like a Gentile, sleeping with the pigs. Come on now, all of these
yeah,
things that were just repulsive to the hearer when Jesus is telling this story. That's us.
exactly. Exactly. And that's the whole book right there. The prodigal son is the basic story, right?
Yeah.
So the prodigal son is the basic story. The prodigal is the house of Israel. They go hang out with the Gentiles. They live like the Gentiles. They eat like the Gentiles, and then they find that they're without inheritance. They're destitute, and
Yeah.
then they want to come back, but it seems like there's no way back. There's no way back. I can't go back to my father. But then he says, you know what? I'm gonna go back to my father, and I'll just say, I'm not even worthy to be your son anymore, Father.
Try make me a
Just
servant.
make me a servant. That's
Yeah.
good enough for me.
Wow.
Right. And of course, the father is overwhelmed with compassion and mercy and so happy that his son is coming back. And of course, the older brother, that's Judah. Judah is not happy to see the younger brother come home. Like, hey, for all these thousands of years, we've been doing it right. We've been doing what you told us to do.
Yeah.
And did we get to go kill the fatted calf and have a party with our friends?
Right.
But this son of yours comes and dad has to correct both of them. Like, look, this brother of yours was dead. Okay. He came back in humility. He came back repentant.
Right.
He came back with no expectations of my mercy, and yet I give it to him freely. But son, you've been with me all these years, and you clearly missed who I really am. You missed how gracious and wonderful I am. And this is where, when I used to think that it was the Jews that were blinded in Romans 11, and then I realized that I and my team have been one of the blinded. It really was this time of, I don't know, just weeping, because I thought I was pretty smart, and I thought our team had figured it all out, and then I realized, like, oh my goodness, we are just as blind. And this is where I think we've got to slow down, because did the Jews miss Jesus? Well, yeah, by and large they did. I mean, in the first century, there were actually a lot of Jews that did see Jesus, but the leadership clearly missed Jesus, no doubt about that. And sadly, the general trajectory of the Jewish people for roughly 2,000 years have, by and large, missed Jesus. Right. But how many things have we missed that are also in the Word? Like, I don't know, the Torah, right? Like, keeping the Sabbath. I mean, things that God's counted into, we totally missed.
Yeah.
And yet the Jews are like, how can you guys not see this? Are you blind? And like, well, yes, we are actually.
We are blinded.
But we've both been, right? We've been blinded to the beauty and wonder and awe and majesty of God's instructions. Whereas the Jews have been like, this stuff is awesome. And we're like, that you're crazy, right? But we're like, we see Messiah. And they're like, who are you talking about? Right? We've both missed these huge parts of God's word. And now he's going to bring them together and we can learn from each other. That's the thing. If we'll slow down, we'll stop trying to be right all the time and just listen to the other side. I hear a lot of invective remarks against the Jews. Say, they don't know anything. I don't have to be a Jew. I don't have to follow any of that rabbinic stuff. And it's like, well, you don't. That's true. But if you slow down and read some of their stuff, there's a book called Every Man's Talmud. I forget the name of the author, but it's a quick read, and it'll show you all the beautiful things in the Talmud. Are there some wonky things? Yeah, of course there are. I mean, no doubt about it, right? I mean, Jesus went up against some of these teachings because he's like, what are you guys talking about? I can't put I can't do spittle and mud and put eye salve in a guy's eye to heal him on the Sabbath. Are you crazy? So he does
Yeah,
just that to just prove the point.
there's
But
a beautiful book by Dr. Roy Blizzard about Jesus and the Mishnah. Just very interesting stuff. So yeah, I think it's
mhm,
we don't need to offhandedly
yeah,
reject things. I do see it as a lot of commentary and things like that. And look, Doug, I love commentaries, but I'm not so blinded to think that
yeah,
commentaries are inspired. And obviously with with
right.
Schofield, a different one. So yeah, yeah.
Well, I know some people that think he was inspired.
I know, right? Yeah.
Maybe he was, but maybe not by God. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. You go into a Christian bookstore, if you remember those things back, 10, 15 years ago. But in a Christian
yeah,
bookstore, you'd have some great books. You're like, wow, this is amazing. And others are
yeah.
like, how did this even get in print? I have no idea.
Right,
But
right.
it's okay. They're all basically opinions and observations about the text that people of different degrees of study are sharing with the market.
Sure.
And that's kind of what the Talmud is doing. Now, the Talmud does take a step too far, because generally they say that the Talmud itself is also God's inspired word, and
Right,
clearly they're going too far. But
right.
if you can just read it as commentary, then it's golden. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And some of it you're going to love, some of it you're going to say, I don't think so, and some you'll throw it away as fast as you can. But the corpus of the Talmud is huge, and we can learn a lot from it, instead of
Sure.
just having a knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, that's bad. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Doug, this has been
One of your
great.
people is asking the wisdom of the Talmud. I don't know if there's a wisdom of the Talmud book. There may be. I'm not aware of that particular book, but there's lots of commentaries about the Talmud, and
Right.
if you can kind of get every man's guide to the Talmud, that's a whole lot easier than reading the entire thing, because it's huge. And
Yeah.
I know there's some passages about Jesus, and they're saying not great stuff about
Right.
him. It's true.
Right.
I mean, it's in there, right? It's in there. And yet the rabbis also somehow knew that Messiah was supposed to show up about 4,000 years after creation. They understood things that you're just like, how did you guys figure this out? I mean, they take a passage from the book of Ruth where she dips
Mhm.
her bread into the wine, and they say this talks about the suffering of the Messiah. You're like, how did you get that? Like, how in the world did you
Wow.
get that? I'm like, I would never have seen that. And yet they were so in tune with the text that there are some things I'm like, amen. I mean, yes. And yet when Messiah came, they missed him, right?
Yeah.
They talk about the two redeemers of Israel. They talk about Moses and Jesus, and how both would come into view and then disappear and then come back into view. And I'm like, yes, amen, right? And then when Jesus comes, they don't see him. I don't
Right.
know. I mean, okay, they missed him. So, but the things about Messiah, they totally got.
Yeah.
And so we can appreciate them for that.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I've really enjoyed this, Doug. This is a great book. If you had one takeaway for somebody that's maybe looking at buying the book, what would you tell them? What would be one good takeaway that you could definitely get from reading your book?
Well, I think this is a great book for people that are somewhat curious about messianics, or they think that you're crazy. And this is a great way to introduce them to these concepts without trying to subvert some stuff in there. Like, I'm not trying to convert anybody to, you got to start keeping Sabbath. I just figure I'll write the book. I'll let God do the work. He'll help people to see what they need to see. And if they're convicted by the Holy Spirit to do something different, great. If not, okay. But we plant seeds. This is a seed book. This is a great way to plant seeds of a different mindset, a different viewpoint on all of it. And once they can see this big picture, then the details become easy. Like, if you try to go and tell somebody you need to keep Sabbath, they're going to think you're crazy. I don't want to keep Sabbath, or you need to give up bacon. they're not going to give up their bacon, man. They'll get out their pitchfork and they'll kill you
Yeah,
because they love
that's
their
right.
bacon.
That's right. Yeah.
But if you can start with this, say nothing about bacon, and just give them this book, and where they say, oh, I think I'm part of Israel. And then they're like, wait a second, I'm part of Israel.
Yeah.
And then they'll do their own thing. They'll get rid of their bacon, right? Because
Got a
then God
natural
will begin to
progression.
show them. But
Yeah.
yeah, but so often we're trying to trim the branches when we need to be getting rid of the roots. And you know, I see bacon as a branch problem instead of a root problem. And
That's good.
once you can figure out the roots, like the root is you're part of Israel. You haven't
Right.
replaced Israel. You're not this pause on God's timetable where he's
Yeah.
now had this little pet project called the church. And of course, none of that Old Testament Jewish stuff applies to the church, right? If you can get rid of that kind of thinking. And so in this book, I do it in such a way that, man, it's the sweetest medicine you've ever taken, right?
I agree.
It's all honey.
I agree.
Yeah.
It is so well written. And listen, guys, if you're watching this and you have some loved ones that are either on the fence or maybe you've never even heard of this, this is an excellent introduction into some very deep spiritual roots that can help people's understanding. And it's kind of like that slippery slope. They get in it, they start reading it, and they just fall in, brother. This is good stuff.
Amen. Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Well, guys, listen, I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. Thanks for all the great comments. And Doug, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know you're real busy. And yeah, my daughter works at a library. She's like, Dad, we need a copy of this at the library. There we go. And so that's good stuff. We'll work on that. But guys, I appreciate everybody for joining in with us today. We will see you on the next time. And Doug, again, thank you so much for coming on and being with us today.
Thank you.